Hi, I'm Mark from Property Ventures. Welcome to this week's New Zealand Property Podcast, where we interview the property expert around New Zealand.
Hi, I'm Mark Honeybone from Property Ventures, and welcome to our weekly podcast where we interview prominent members of the investment community along with other professionals in the New Zealand property market. This is a free service from Property Ventures so that you can keep current and learn from some of the best around New Zealand. To check us out, take a look at propertyventures.co.nz. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Today we are very fortunate to have Andrew King from Auckland, who has been President of the New Zealand Property Investor Association for the past 3 years and the Auckland PIA for about 8 years prior to that. He is an investor and businessman himself. It is important for investors to be involved with like-minded people and to get further education, and this is what the local PIAs do. So welcome today, Andrew.
Oh, thanks, Mark.
So first of all, tell us about the Property Investor Association, what it is, and how many associations there are within the country.
Sure. Well, the Property Investors Federation is like the national organisation for all the property investor associations around the country. So there are 20 associations around the country. They're all not-for-profit organisations. They're like an industry group, really, where the main aim is to get people who are interested in rental property together and to improve their professionalism and their profitability. So we are an industry group in that we're trying to instill good ways of running their business, but we also want to help them to be as profitable as they possibly can as well.
And so 20 associations, that's in fact more than I thought. So there's somewhere ready for everyone in the country to go without being too far away, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much. We've got them from Northland down to Invercargill and pretty much everywhere in between. I'd say we cover most of the country.
So for the people who are listening that does know about the PIA, I believe your role has recently changed. So can you fill everyone in on those changes?
Yeah, well, as I said, it's a not-for-profit organisation and it's primarily been run by volunteers. All the associations are run by volunteers, but there's a few of the larger ones employ administrators. But there's usually a committee run of volunteers who do the actual legwork and look at what type of meetings to have and organise speakers and things like that. The Federation was pretty much the same. The Federation is actually made up of 9 people and we run it for the whole country. Primarily, the Federation takes care of national things, like we deal with national politics, so we talk to MPs, we do national discounts and sponsors for our members, and we handle most of the media, so we look at the media and we handle most of the media inquiries. It's a really big job. The President's role has grown over the years. Especially under, I think, Craig Padden about 10 years ago. It started getting to become more of a role, even though it was a voluntary role. The tasks were expanding a lot. And Martin Evans, when he took over as president, he's from Christchurch, he expanded it again. And so the role of president for the New Zealand Property Investors Federation has grown and grown so that it started becoming more than really what a volunteer could be expected or reasonably expected to do. It was taking me around about 3 days a week to fulfill this role, and in a voluntary role it was really difficult to do. And I've got my own expanding business, and I found that the last 18 months were very hectic. I didn't feel like I was doing a particularly good job anyway, to be honest. When the position came up to be re-elected, there was sort of an expectation that I would stay on as president again. But thinking about it, I didn't feel I was doing a good enough job, and I was under stress, and so I declined to put my name forward again. But that brought a bit of a problem in that it's really difficult to ask someone who's involved in the industry perhaps has the experience to be able to deal with media and politicians and things like that, and do research on the industry. It's difficult to find someone who can do all those things, plus they can give up 3 days a week to be able to do it and to do it well. And no one, unfortunately, on our executive was in a position to be able to do that. So we have actually had we've got a 5-year strategy for the Federation, and one of those things was to actually employ an executive officer who would do a lot of the work that's currently being done by volunteers. And we basically pushed that forward. So we've now got an executive officer position who is employed for 2 days a week. And I have basically been given that position for a 1-year contract just to get over the next year, in fact, up to November of this year, which is when the general election is. So hopefully that'll provide some continuity to dealing with the MPs and the sponsors and the discounters and things like that. So essentially that meant that I had to quit my role as president, because the president, who is now Terry LeGros from Hamilton, he will be, looking after my position more in a governance role. So a lot of the things that the president used to do, the executive officer will now be doing, and the president will now be performing that governance role over that. So it's got to the situation we've now got someone who's going to be paid for 2 days a week. It probably won't cover all the work that the position requires, so there's still going to be some sort of a voluntary role in there, but it does mean that going forward it'll make it, I hope, a lot easier to find someone when I step down, and actually make it easier to get the right person in there and actually recompense them for the large amount of work that they will be doing.
Right, yeah, that makes total sense, and good to see the Federation still developing, and the end result will be better for the members within the Federation. So, yeah, that's great. And
thanks, Mark.
And just moving on, really, from what you said there about talking to the government or what have you, I've been to many conferences and meetings, and I've heard you speak several times before with real recent updates, which is really helpful to the investor. And at times I've heard two housing ministers speak at your presentations. So what direct lines does the PIA have to government, and how can this help the investor out?
We do have very good input into not just the Minister of Housing, but other MPs as well, and a lot of opposition MPs and shadow spokespersons for housing. And it's not even just the MPs, really. There's an awful lot of what are they called, policy advisors and other government employees who we deal with to try and put forward the voice of property investors in New Zealand. And this is a huge industry too. I don't think people realise just what an enormous industry the private rental property industry is. There's approximately 450,000 privately owned rental properties in New Zealand. There's around about 300,000 private rental property owners, and we own collectively around 84%, or 356,000 of those rental properties. So to put it into a dollar perspective, those properties are worth around about 100 billion, and the rental income per year is 7.8 billion. So this is a massive industry, and we really need to have the PIF there to speak for that industry and to be the voice for that industry. And because it is such a large industry, and because we are the only real organisation that speaks for property investors, we do get the ear of government fairly easily, and they do seem to respect what we have to say. I must say, though, we've built up that relationship over probably about 10 or 12 years, really, and it's been a growing thing. And I think over that time, the input that we've had into policy decisions, I think we've shown that we're a reasonable group of people, and we're not just single-minded and out for whatever we can get. We can see the overall benefit of having tenants doing well on the property and having the properties in good condition, and to make sure that a good, well-running industry is not just for us, but it involves all the participants in that industry as well. And we try and see everyone's point of view and help government to come up to wise decisions. And I think that approach has definitely helped to to make us get on very well with the national politicians, and to have them actually come to us for advice on things, which is a great position to be, considering that 12 years ago they changed the Residential Tenancies Act, and we weren't even involved in that at all. So we've come a long way in the last 10 or 12 years.
Absolutely. Gee, some of those figures are mind-boggling. 450,000 private rental properties within the country, and I guess that's sort of what it is. And the communication between the government and yourselves has been fantastic, and at the annual conferences that you run, I've seen that firsthand the last couple of years, which has been fantastic. That's awesome. Just go on from that then, with the government, what are the sort of topical issues right now being discussed between the government and the Federation that you might want to disclose to people?
Well, I suppose the bigger ones we've been working on for the past year has been the introduction of a warrant of fitness for private rental properties. But I suppose there's been quite a few things coming up, actually. There's housing affordability. I think rental property owners were attacked for causing people believe that they were causing house prices to go up. So we've had a lot to do in the housing affordability issue, and to show how we aren't really the part of the problem, and it is a complex issue. There's also social housing provisions being changed, so that a lot of there's a proposal at the moment, and it looks like it's going to go through, that the government will actually be giving some social providers actual state houses that they can then use to rent out to people. They're also going to give them the income related rent that Housing New Zealand currently is the only organisation that has, and that's a bit of a concern for private owners, because it will mean that these third sector providers will be able to use those assets and the income that they receive from government to be able to go out into the open market and borrow more money and potentially build up quite a housing asset which they can use and will effectively be in competition with us. So that's a bit of a concern which we're working at. There's also the capital gains tax area, and we've been working on faster access to the tenancy tribunal, and to get better enforcement of awards when they're made against tenants. So there's quite a lot that we've been doing over the last year, but I suppose the private rental property warrant of fitness is the key one that we're driving in at the moment. There's quite a wave towards having a warrant of fitness for the private sector, and we're talking to lots of different organisations to try and put forward a different point of view. Based on that, our feeling is the warrant of fitness is very much a broad-brushed solution to some people, some tenants living in poor conditions. What we would like to see is that we focus on those low-income households who are living in cold, damp homes, and we investigate exactly what it is that they need. We think, from our point of view, we should be providing them with insulation and heating, but it goes wider than that. We think that also a lot of these tenants simply cannot afford to turn on their heating, and if that's the case, it doesn't matter how much insulation you're going to have in that rental property, it's still going to be cold and damp. So there's a lot more to it than just the warrant of fitness, and we think it should focus on heating and insulation, and there should be other incentives in there to help tenants or encourage them to turn on their heating. And also to teach them just how they can keep their homes warmer and drier. For instance, not having LPG heating in there, pumping the moisture into the air and making it harder to heat in the end. How to let the sun in to actually heat up the home, to open windows, to ventilate and things like that. There's an awful lot of things which can be done to improve it must be said, only a few of the tenants, or a small percentage of the tenant population, who are actually living in cold, damp houses, rather than just this blanket warrant of fitness, which is going to be hugely expensive. So there's a lot of things that we're working on at the moment to try and change that wave of expectation that a warrant of fitness will come into the private rental market.
Yeah, it's a massive topic at the moment, and I saw it just after the news the other night, reporting on the installation. I think it was in Auckland, And yeah, what I suppose what they don't always think about, and what it's going to cost the investor up front to do that, and take it. Insulation and heating is probably the important part of it.
That's exactly right. And and the warrant of fitness in itself, it means that there are going to be regular inspections, and they're looking for what I think are crazy things. Has it got a toilet? Has it got a bath? Things like that, which it's kind of patronising towards the tenant, really. And eventually they are going to pay for that. So rents are going to go up, and the target group that people like the Children's Commissioner are concerned about are low-income people who are living in poor conditions. If the rent goes up, how is that going to encourage them to turn the heating on and help themselves?
It's exactly what I was saying to the people who aren't really property-related people the other day, watching the article, and I said there's far more to this than meets the eye, and that's exactly that. I said the end result out of this is the rents are going to have to go up to compensate for some of this, which... It's a heck of a decision to make, isn't it? And but it's great to know, and a lot of people don't realise that the Federation is there on behalf of us landlords, backing us, talking to government, trying to get a happy medium between all this. I assume this will end up being over a period of time, a scaling type thing, when they work this warrant of fitness issue out.
Well, we're actually hoping that it doesn't come in. One thing that has concerned a lot of the policy advisors, the government policy advisors, is that even before it has been introduced and come into law, there's already people who are saying it should include this, it should include that. For instance, P-Labs have come in, so the people who go around inspecting P-Labs say that that should be part of the inspection as well. Well, that adds another $100 to the cost of it. You've had Otago Medical School have come in and said that they've actually said a whole range of things that should be added to the warrant of fitness that isn't even there yet. Wow. And one of them is that the property should be oriented towards the sun. There's just ludicrous things. And previously, there's been other things like the age of the property. That some people believe that rental property shouldn't be very old, and so a warrant of fitness should have a date in it where if it's older than this date, it cannot be a rental property anymore. I just don't think they realise that this is all going to have a huge impact on the market, and it's going to be detrimental for tenants, the people that they're supposedly trying to support.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Just capital gains, as you said, the other probably issue that has been on and off and talked about for the last 3 or 4 years or longer. Any thoughts of whether National win the election at the end of the year or Labour, how that might have any effect, or where's the thinking behind that at the moment?
Sure. Well, National have been very clear that they don't believe that a capital gains tax is a good idea, and they would not introduce one. So they've been quite categoric over that. Labour have been as equally categorical on the other side, of course, in that they believe that it will be a good thing and it should be brought in. We have had discussions with Labour, but we haven't managed to convince them that it's not a great idea. Having said that, their policy at least is reasonably fair in that it will apply to all investments, not just rental property. I think the finance sector, who have been calling for a capital gains tax on rental property for a number of years now, they thought it was such a great thing when Labor announced that it was going to be part of their policy. But once the fine print came out and they found out that it was going to be a capital gains tax applying to shares as well, and farms and businesses and everything, they kind of went a bit quiet on the idea. So I think they might have scored a bit of an own goal on themselves actually on that.
Yep. Yeah, okay. This will be interesting to see what does happen if Labour come in, that's for sure. But just we've probably already covered a lot of the reasons why, but a question I was going to ask you is, why is the PIA important for new investors, and also how do they get hold of the local association?
Sure. I think it is basically because we are the voice of property investors. So we do an awful lot of, I feel really proud about the work we do, actually. Not just us, though. It's all the property investor associations around the country. There's some really amazing people who put in so much time because they've got a lot out of this investment themselves, and they're giving back, basically, to help other people. And so although we do a lot on a national basis and politically and things like that, for investors themselves, I think it's one of the best things that they can do. Even new investors, if they're looking to buy an investment, the best thing they can do is actually join an association, because you're going to meet like-minded people who are not selling you anything. They really just want to share information, and that's one of the best things you can do as a property investor, is to get as much information as you possibly can, to avoid mistakes. And by talking to people, you can hear what they've done, and it can stretch you, and you can think, oh, I never thought about doing something that way, and it can take you into an investment area that you never would have thought about. And on a negative side, I suppose, you can hear about people's mistakes as well, and you can learn from their mistakes without having to make it yourself. So I think there's an awful lot that you can get personally from being a member of a local property investor association, and generally with all the lobbying that we do, the whole industry, I'd like to think, gains from having us around as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I can speak for my local association here. I mean, the experience in there is quite phenomenal, and some people have grown great portfolios and have a lot of wealth. And when you get to, you're in there and you start to talk, and they're more than willing to help you, do well yourself. And as you said, they're there for the right reasons. I've been to many conferences and seminars in the last sort of 10 or 12 years with property, and there's usually always a sell at the end of the night, and it's very, very refreshing going to even the annual conference or the monthly meetings here, and just listening to the guest speaker, and there's no hard sell or no sell at all at the end of the night. So that's great. And the other thing too is I know in Auckland, for example, a very great committee or association up there, and they have a young investors group, and they've got someone for everyone situation. So, yeah, that's great. And
you're right. The larger associations can do that, of course, which is nice. We when you do get big, you do start to look at the different investors that you do have in your membership, and as you say, there's the young investors, but Auckland also has an apartment group, because apartments are a big part of the market up here, and I think Wellington and Christchurch are looking at that as well. There's also new investor groups, and even different geographical groups that they split them up into, so that you can provide, you can meet the local investors and find out exactly what's happening in your area of interest. So yeah, they're really good, and they provide a hell of a good service for such a low amount of money, really. And as you say, it's very independent, so the people are just coming in there talking about what they think, and are genuinely want to share the information and help other people to grow their business. And the whole ethos of it, I feel, is that if you've got members there, if I share information with you and you share information with me, then we both grow, and it's got to be a good thing.
Absolutely. Great way to do business too when you're in any of the property investment fields. So just off the PIA issue or points, just for a few seconds here. For a new investor, you're actively in the property market for many, many years yourself. You're an investor. What sort of would you give a new investor today? If you were going to give them any advice, what would you say to them?
Well, naturally, join your local PIA. It's probably the best investment you'll make. Yeah. But I think there's nowadays there's also a lot of books that you can get as well, which gives you a really good background information. And they're not just overseas books. When I first started investing back in '86, it was very difficult to get any books. And if you could get books on the subject, then they were usually American. Whereas now there's a heap of books that you can get on how to invest in property from a New Zealand perspective, written by New Zealanders, which is really good. And I think getting your head around that and around the numbers and how they work and things like that before you actually buy a property is probably the best thing you can do. I think it's always best that you can plan and know what you're going to do before you leap in and actually buy a property. And I think once you've got, because there's so many different ways you can actually invest, and there's so many different types of investment as well. If you're young, it may be different than if you're an older investor. If you've got lots of equity but low income, there may be a different type of property that's right for you, where you're looking for high rental returns rather than capital gains. If it's the other way around, you may go for capital gains type property and not be so interested in the income it produces. So I think you need to take any investor needs to do a business plan. And part of that is to start off with is to analyse where you are now, think about where you want to go, and then work out the strategy as to the best way of getting you there. So that business plan, I think, would be the best thing that any investor could do at any stage of their investment too, not just new investments, but old hands as well. A lot of people that have been members of the association for years, I've been talking to them, and they're now getting of an age where they're starting to think about retirement, and that involves another round of planning about exactly how they're going to do it and how they're going to start making more of an income from this investment rather than looking at capital growth and buying more properties and things like that. So planning, I think, is a key thing that would help any investor.
Okay, so listeners, what we suggest is get out there and join your local associations. The cost is very small, and what you get as part of that is you get an annual subscription to the New Zealand Property Investor magazine, which is a great magazine out every month, which has current affairs and issues and really good education amongst it. You get monthly meetings to keep you current. As Andrew said, the Federation brings discounts to different organisations and companies within the country you can use. So Andrew, it's on behalf of Property Ventures and the listeners who are listening to this, I would sincerely like to thank you for your time and insight for today.
Oh, not a problem, Mark. Thanks very much.
It was great to have Andrew on the show today and to learn about the different ways in which the NZPIF is representing investors within the government circles. If you want to join your local association, go to nzpif.org.nz or look in the monthly Property Investor magazine for more details. If you have any requests or suggestions for somebody you'd like to hear on the show, please contact us at info@propertyventures.co.nz. Finally, if you enjoyed the show, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave a positive review on iTunes. Have a great day and thanks for listening.